I'm not going to even give Harold a minute to catch his breath. I won't ask him to say anything. I want to officially call the Agency Operations Committee to order, and again, I want to welcome everybody to the July meeting. I know I don't need to remind everybody, but we are being broadcast live via the internet, and so I want to remind everybody of that. I want to just take a minute to make a couple of personal comments. One, I want to introduce a couple of new faces up here. Jim Lee, who is here with us today, one of our new board members who we're delighted to have. And I'm going to give Jim a minute to say hello to each of you and tell him a little bit about his background. But I can tell you he comes highly recommended. He and I have a great mutual friend in East Texas, and who has done a lot of work with Jim, I think, professionally as well as personally. And he has had nothing but just great things to say about him. So I welcome you. I don't even think Fred's named the committee yet. I don't know if he has or not, but if you're not on AOC, we're delighted to have you here today. And even though you're not a member of the committee, we really encourage you to engage and ask any questions as we go through the agenda. So any comments, Jim?
No, but thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm excited about this. The support and the team and the introductions have been wonderful, so thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jim. The second new face up here is Amir Barzin, and student regent. And I tell you, we're delighted to have you, Amir. Amir and I were talking just a minute ago. We've had some great student regents on this board, and one of the things that I will tell you is we've probably learned more from the student regents than many times you may have learned from us, because we get the student perspective about higher education. So we're delighted to welcome you here and encourage you to make any comments.
Yeah. I appreciate it. It's a big honor to be on this board, and I look forward to serving. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And then finally, I will just say, for me, it's an honor to be able to chair my last AOC meeting. There's a few of us that will be going off the board in August, and I know tomorrow we'll get to do this, but to my fellow board members and especially to the staff, I just want to say it has been a great 7 years. A little bittersweet as you walk in, and knowing it's going to be your last 2 days, but to the other board members, especially the new board members, I can tell you, you will not find a more dedicated staff at any state agency than the people sitting out here. And when you go through a session, they're right there by your side, always well prepared, and then all throughout in between the sessions, they just do a great job of representing higher education. So to each of you, thanks so much, and I'm sorry we've kept you waiting, but that's due to our vice chairman here. So Harold, welcome here. The first thing I'd like to do is to get the approval of the minutes of the April 26, 2011 meeting. Each of you has been provided with a copy of those prior to this meeting. Are there any questions or corrections?
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Yes.
Second, okay, by Durga. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same sign. We're going to skip over a couple of agenda items, and let me see, where is this? Our agenda item 5B is we are paying our legal counsel today, so we'd like to go ahead and move them up to the top of the agenda. This agenda item is 5B, and it's consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee for a resolution relating to authorizing the filing of one or more applications to obtain a portion of the state's allocation for private activity bonds, as well as unencumbered state ceiling. I'd like to ask Tim Dytloff and also Dan Weaver and Patrick Krishock to come up and make this presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Tim Dytloff with Vincent & Elkins, the board's bond counsel. As you know, the board has a student loan program that you fund through the issuance of tax-exempt bonds. And in the state of Texas, before you can do that, you have to obtain private activity bond allocation from the Texas Bond Review Board. Under the federal tax code, your bonds are deemed private activity bonds because the proceeds benefit private individuals, students. And the state of Texas has a rather elaborate process on how the various issuers can obtain that allocation. This resolution is the first step in the board's process for issuing bonds, and this resolution authorizes staff to apply for up to $350 million in allocation for the next state fiscal year for any bonds you issue during that period. And it also authorizes one or more applications to obtain unencumbered allocation in the amount of $325 million. That's kind of a new process that was put into play with a recent amendment to allow for that allocation to go out to state agencies that could use it if no one else needed it at the end of the calendar year. So I'm here to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Any questions? Ken, Arturo, will you just, and I guess Dan will speak to this also, but in terms of the amount of room that we're going to have, we know that there's going to be a greater demand for these loans due to the cession and financial aid. Can you speak to that at all in terms of?
Dan.
Okay.
Certainly, I guess it's kind of a two-edged sword right now. We're seeing a little bit of increased demand compared to last year. With that, though, is a much more restrictive lending program from the federal government. So financial aid offices have a much more difficult time of packaging alternative loans or state loans to the point that they essentially are much easier to package federal loans. It's much easier to package federal plus loans or parent loans also. So I think there's opportunities for a greater loan volume from a state's perspective, but there are certain restrictions that are now in place. And the financial aid offices across the state are grappling with what's the best approach to take in order to make these Cal loans essentially available to their student body. So it's not well, the other part of that is, clearly with this year's state aid, there's still a fair amount of state aid. There's still a fair amount of Pell Grants. The people that tend to borrow Cal loans are not necessarily the neediest students, and we don't necessarily want the neediest students to avail themselves of a college access loan. So I don't want to, I'm trying to downplay a little bit the fact that we're going to have a mad rush to get $300 million of college access loan volume, because I don't necessarily think that that's going to happen. What we're trying to do, though, is to create the capacity that, should it happen, we'll be prepared.
Okay.
So we're really working with the financial aid offices to make sure that they're aware that we have a great product, we have a great interest rate. We certainly want students to consider a college access loan when they're looking at all of their different financing options. But we also want to be wary, or we want to make sure that they avail themselves of all of the grant aid that's available to them. And I kind of tap dance a little bit around your question.
It was more the capacity question. I was just.
Well, I think we have organizational capacity to absorb kind of as much loan volume as we need to absorb. I think that the Proposition 3 that's coming out, I don't know if we're going to talk a little bit about that maybe later in the meeting, but Proposition 3 is the second part of our bonding capacity that came out of the session. This really is the SB 1799 portion, which increased our portion within the private activity bond allocation that we have, but the other piece of the puzzle is Proposition 3, which sets the limit at a higher level.
Okay.
So I believe that this is the contingencies within the appropriations are that 1799 is contingent on the passage of Proposition 3. So if the voters say yes on Proposition 3, then we'll be able to have an expanded capacity. If the voters say no for whatever reason, then we pretty much operate the loan program within the same parameters that we're currently operating the loan program.
Okay.
So clearly we're working on our materials on Proposition 3 to kind of just get the facts out about what the proposition does and what it doesn't do. and then it really kind of depends on what the voters say in November.
Any other questions? Could I have a motion to adopt the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee for a resolution relating to authorizing the filing of one or more applications to obtain a portion of the state's allocation for private activity bonds and the unencumbered state ceiling and containing other provisions relating to the subject? Could I have a motion? Durga, second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by the same sign. Thank you. Thanks so much, Tim. Appreciate it. Let's see. We need to jump back now to, I guess, the Deputy Commissioner's report. And that's agenda item 3, and this is a standing report that Dr. Alonzo will make. I'd call on him to introduce the topics and the staff who will be making the presentations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to present the first 3 reports that you see on your agenda, which is the ARA report, financial report, and an update on facilities. And then I will call on one of our staff members, Sid, and Dr. Harris, to present an update on the IT initiatives and on our lean processes. The ARA program is in its final 3 months. We are on track to bringing this program to a successful completion, hopefully submitting the closeout report very soon after that, and closing the books on a very interesting chapter of the coordinating board. When all is said and done, we will have administered $723 million over about a 2-year period. At this point, we have reimbursed approximately 96% of the funds, and we have closed out 125 out of the 220 projects that were active. I would like to highlight 2 recent ARA-related activities, both of which are very positive and which, in my opinion, speak volumes about the staff at the coordinating board. The first one is a just completed review of ARA funds by the U.S. Department of Education. It was a very thorough review, very comprehensive, and while we do not have the draft report yet, it's scheduled to come out soon, the exit conference that we had with the federal team indicated that the report will have no findings and no recommendations. The staff from the department was very complimentary of our efforts. Several times they single out the coordinating board and the work that we have done. And I say that not because of myself, but because of the staff that has worked very hard to accomplish that. So I look forward to sharing that actual report with the committee at a subsequent meeting. But it is good news. The second ARA-related item that I want to bring to your attention is that as part of our due diligence as administrators of these funds, we outsource an audit of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, the TCEQ program. They receive $13 million for the emission reduction program, so-called TERP, with ARA funds. And we selected the agency for an audit because of the large amount of the grant and because of the high visibility of that program. This is where they give out grants to companies or individuals to retrofit their equipment to make it more environmental friendly. Again, I don't have the report. It's due to come out on Friday of this week, but conversations with the external auditor lead us to believe that the auditors had no findings, and we'll soon issue a report, and again we will bring that to a subsequent committee meeting. But it is something that we're very, very happy that it turned out that way. On the financial report, you received the quarterly financial report that we issued, and this one is as of June 30th. That went out with your materials early on in the month. This report is a standing, as you have noted, Mr. Chairman, a standing report. It provides the status of our finances for both the operating budget and our trustee funds. It's a report that we use internally to track our expenditures and to see where we are and how we're doing with our programs. I will not comment on any, and I won't take you through every one of those pages, but I certainly will be glad to either myself or have staff respond to any questions that you may have on that report. And then my final update for this afternoon is on the renovation of the facilities. Work continues. We are on track to complete all the renovations by the end of the year, by the end of December. A little bit longer than what we thought or we had hoped that it would take, but the building is looking good. I have received many positive comments on the appearance of the building. We're happy with what's happening, and I'd like to express my appreciation to staff for their patience putting up with the noise and the dust and the disruptions, but I want to tell them that it soon will be over and we will have the construction crews out of here. So I pause here to see if there's any questions before I move on to introducing staff for the next part.
Yeah, the only comment I'd make is, Jim, for you and Amir, the ARA program, and you might say, why in the world is the Higher Education Board dealing with TQEC? Okay, is we had the privilege and honor of being selected as a state agency to administer all the funds, okay, which was, a very daunting task when we originally got it, because from a staffing or resource standpoint and all the issues of making sure that there was accountability for these funds, we wanted to make sure that they were all awarded in the appropriate manner and that we had the appropriate reporting to comply with the feds. And so that's why they were in here. We were asked by the governor's office to take that, and I've said this every meeting. This will probably be close to our final oral report. May have one more, I guess, but I will just say that our staff has done a great job. Dan Griffith, and we've recognized everybody each time we've been here, but it was a topic that caused this board a lot of concern, making sure that we administered it appropriately. Because of all the different institutions that we touch. So just an explanation if you're kind of sitting there going, how in the world did that end up here? So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The final report under the Deputy Commissioner's report section is a update on our IT initiatives, one that you have asked for an update for us to present that at the AOC. And also want to have a update on our implementation of lean processes in our IT department. If you recall, last time I reported to this committee that we were going to initiate lean processes in our IT department, use it as a proof of concept, and then roll it out to the rest of the agency as appropriate and as time permits. So I would like to call on Sid Hodgson, our Assistant Commissioner for IT Services, to present the the status update on IT operations, and then he will present and introduce our consultant, Dr. Charles Harris. Sid.
Good. Thank you, Arturo. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. You recall at the last meeting I presented an update on some of the IT initiatives we were undertaking, and in particular those related to instituting stronger IT governance within the organization. At that committee, you requested that I report back at this meeting with an update on those activities. You recall that I talked about the establishment of a governance committee in the organization, an IT steering committee. That committee, I'm pleased to report, has been very active. We've had 8 meetings of that group since March, and just as a way of a reminder, that committee is comprised of the associate commissioner, the deputy commissioners, and assistant commissioners. And it's been extremely active. It's been extremely helpful to me and my management team in terms of providing guidance, advice, and also helping us prioritize our IT initiatives. The second initiative is the Lean Six Sigma project, which Dr. Harris on my right will be reporting on in a couple of minutes. Essentially what we're doing there is re-examining or re-engineering all our IT processes and hoping to develop a more lean way of doing things, more effective and responsive way. Related to that is the implementation of the Unitas Software as a Service product. That product will help us manage our projects better, project portfolio management, resource management. Later on, there's some other modules we'll be implementing, but we're looking at a September implementation for that We kind of slowed down the implementation of that because we were awaiting the results of the lean process examination, because obviously we want to make sure that the software is configured to reflect those re-engineered processes. We've also been investing quite heavily in skills training for our IT staff. It was something that was lacking, and I'm pleased to report that in August, 2 of our project managers will be taking their project management professional certification exams with the Project Management Institute, so I'm quite happy about that. Another activity we're about to embark on is the transition of our development environment and methodologies from classic waterfall approach to a more agile approach for developing applications. We're hoping to provide some training for staff in August, and then in September select one project, perhaps a medium-sized project, 4 to 6 months, to employ those new methodologies on an active project to see how it works out. Something I'm quite pleased about is with the new budget now approved, or approved at tomorrow's meeting, I hope, we hope to be able to use 3 existing vacancies within IT to create a new position. It's something that I feel strongly that will help the agency and help IT, and that is the business relationship manager position. And essentially what we're looking at that position to provide is really a frontline representative of IT working within the business area. So even though they'll be part of my FTE count, those people will be physically located in the business areas and take their day-to-day direction from the business areas. And what we're hoping to do there is really provide better knowledge within IT of the business priorities, and more closely align our strategies in IT with the business strategies and objectives. We hope it will also provide better management of the demand side of the IT governance model, and that is in looking at potential opportunities for automation within the program areas, estimating what it would take to provide those things, and kind of prioritizing or conducting a triage on requests from the program area before it goes to the steering committee. So I'm quite excited about that activity. There are several other initiatives underway. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through these. I'm not going to read them unless there's specific questions. Excuse me. Just one thing I would like to highlight, and that is the fact that since our last meeting, DIR has given us formal approval to proceed with moving our electronic mail and calendaring activities or applications from the Team for Texas Data Center Services contract to a cloud offering. The next step in that process is to obtain approval from the LBB to transfer the savings in the capital budget, which is what pays for the Team for Texas initiative, over to our operational budget to obtain that service. So I think that'll help us. As you know, that's been a problematic area. As the Commissioner well knows, that's been a problem within the agency, is the service provided for our email and calendaring. Be happy to entertain any questions on those things. Or?
Any questions from any members?
No.
Okay.
Okay, well, in that case, I'd like to introduce Dr. Charles Harris, who is our lean consultant and has been working with us for the past couple of months. Dr. Harris.
Thank you, Sid. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, executive management, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about our Lean Six Sigma initiative here in the IT department at the CB. We've been engaged in the IT Lean Six Sigma implementation for the past 7 weeks, with completion scheduled for the end of September. The first half of the implementation has been dedicated to assessment, training, and process design. We're now at about the halfway point of the project, and our presentation today will attempt to give you both an explanation of what we are doing and the most important reasons why we are doing it. This definition that you see on the screen behind us over here is provided to emphasize that Lean Six Sigma, or LSS as the short term goes, is a systematic approach that we're implementing. It's both scalable and sustainable, and its goals are simply the elimination of waste, continuous improvement, and the pursuit of perfection. Now, some folks have heard of Lean, some of Six Sigma. But why the combination of Lean and Six Sigma? Well, Lean processes are speedy processes and less costly to execute. Six Sigma brings those same processes under statistical control and permits data-driven management decisions, a very important factor. The main purpose of leaning processes is to identify and remove non-value-added work and leave only value-added work as identified by the customer. That's the real bottom line for the activity. Six Sigma, for its part, permits data-driven decisions and promotes a highly prescriptive cultural infrastructure that's capable of delivering sustainable results. And the key word there is sustainable. Note on this slide the very high costs related to slow speed processes or rework, and those are not exaggerated there. Only the combination of Lean and Six Sigma offers the opportunity for both low cost and high quality. Another purpose of implementing Lean Six Sigma is to eliminate as much work in process as possible. It's quite common for work in process, or WIP as it's called, to be in a wait state for as much or more than 90% of its time in production. Now there's a staggering thought for you. 90% of its time in production in a wait state. The CB is fortunate to have executive engagement already. Your best insurance policy for overall success is bullet 3 on this slide. Everyone in the agency should receive some level of LSS training. A white belt certificate, which is the equivalent of about 8 hours of instruction, creates a staff member who understands the objectives and the reasons behind Lean Six Sigma activities and culture. They then become part of a solid foundation for data-driven decisions at all levels of management. I would emphasize to you today these 5 points as the most important lessons for executive management regarding Lean Six Sigma. As encouragement to continue what I refer to as the rat hunt for slow processes, remember point 4 here especially. This was the discovery of William Shewhart of Bell Labs in the 1920s, who was the father of statistical process control. He also made another statement that I think is very significant and that I hope that the IT department will remember long after this is over. Data out of context have no meaning. That's the purpose of Lean Six Sigma. The IT department is now more than halfway through its implementation. By the end of August, I predict that you will have an IT department where every member has either a yellow or a green belt Lean Six Sigma certification. Every member. I'd like to emphasize that. That's a collection of leaders for today and for the future. You should be very proud of their efforts. They've been both persistent and patient. The month of September then will be the shakedown cruise for the Lean Six Sigma implementation. It marks the transition to a state of continuous improvement that should never be abandoned. To reach this penultimate goal, the business and academic areas of the CD should become fully engaged as partners with ITS. That will assure a successful outcome for the CB. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them for you.
All right, questions for Dr. Harris?
Sounds pretty exciting.
It is. You can count me not as a consultant, but as a Lean Six Sigma evangelist. It just ought to be everywhere.
You know, Arturo, maybe you can help. Are we going to, and your consulting work is going to be predominantly focused on just the IT area, is that correct?
Right now, exclusively, yes.
Okay. And, you know, I know that Fred's talked about how do we take the lean process throughout the entire agency. Can you comment on that, Arturo, how that relates to the next steps there?
Well, as I've mentioned, and I've used the word before, which I think is common in this industry, is to come up with a proof of concept. In other words, find those things that work, find those things that are applicable to more than just the IT department that we can roll out and implement elsewhere in the agency. I can't tell you what exactly steps that we'll take. We'll either have to continue with our outsourcing of training, or maybe find a champion. I don't know. Sid is already frowning at me over there because he thinks I'm going to ask him to train everybody in the agency. I don't know the specifics, Mr. Chairman, but the thought is that once we get this under our belt, that we can find ways of spreading this throughout the agency. And that, you're right, that's what Fred has asked me to do, to make sure that we don't just stop with the IT department and leave it at that.
I think the other thing that'd be real interesting is, which will be, subsequent to obviously end of August, but for the board would really be to be given some tangible examples of what processes have really improved as a result of this. I hear all this, and it's kind of hard for me to get my head around all this. I'm just being, it sounds great, and green, yellow belt certification. I don't know how much, that doesn't mean a lot to me, okay? I don't think I really have a full grasp of what that means. And so I'd love to put that in layman's terms for the board when we come back, as to specifically what are those processes that are being impacted in that IT area, so we can tangibly understand where are those improvements and that continuous improvement being made. Now, I'm just speaking for myself, and I won't be here at the end of August, but for the rest of the board members, that would help. If I were going to be here after that, I would really like to have a better grasp of what processes are being impacted in the agency. And then also, how can we, as you're saying, Dr. Alonzo, carry this through the agency? I wish Fred could have been here for this presentation. So,
we're looking forward to sharing this with Fred. Now, one of the things that is at your desk here or at your places, I believe, is our first newsletter that we call Leaning Forward. It just gives you some of the projects, maybe some of those details you're looking for there, Mr. Chairman. But I just, when Sid and Charles asked me to write an article for this, if you recall, Wood, you were probably the only one here that was there. A couple of years ago, there was a presentation from one of the Midwest states that talked to us about, or talked to the board about lean processes at their state government. And one of the terms that they use, and it really stuck with me and then resonated with me, is that what I entitled my article, Common Sense Uncommonly Applied. I like that. It resonated with me. And so, because, if not to oversimplify it, but to bring it down to a level that I think most of us can understand, that's really what it's all about. We just use common sense to do things more effectively and efficiently. So anyway, we look forward to giving you more as we develop this, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, Arturo, is that the
that's the final topic under the Deputy Commissioner's report, unless there's any questions.
Right. No, there are no action items in there. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. Agenda item 4 is discussion of the audit of the agency-wide financial statements for fiscal year ending August 31st, 2010 by KPMG. And the audit report is going to be presented by Ms. Susan Warren, partner KPMG, and also Rebecca Goldstein, who's been the audit manager and been on site the majority of the time doing the work. Susan, Rebecca, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Board, Dr. Alonzo, and Commissioner. Is that better? Okay. I am Susan Warren with KPMG, and this is Rebecca Goldstein with KPMG, and we just wanted to work through the results of the 2010 audit, which was completed last month in June, and being presented to the Board today. You should have the presentation with you, but what we'll start with on the agenda is just a reminder of what an external audit is, basically the responsibilities of management versus KPMG, and then of course then get into the results of the audit, which will include conversation about internal controls, adjustments, changes in accounting policies, the estimates in your financial statements, statements. And the other matters is basically all the other items that the standards require us to communicate to you when we perform a financial statement audit. On page 2, under management's responsibilities, we discussed these at the planning meeting. They're just the standards do require us just to kind of remind you what your management team has done for us during the audit. They are the individuals who adopted the accounting principles. They maintain the internal control structure. They prepare the financial statements in accordance with all the accounting rules, which is known as generally accepted accounting principles. They identify the laws, the regulations, all the state rules and things that have to go into those financial statements, and then they make all that information available to us during the audit process. And then what we do with that is we do our audit work, which includes detailed vouching, analytical, a lot of interviews to form the opinion on those financial statements. And the second bullet talks about reasonable but not absolute assurance. As we mentioned during planning, what that means is we scope things, we have materiality, we look at a variety of different transactions, focus more on the risk areas than the non-risk areas, non-routine transactions versus routine transactions. And of course, we follow our professional standards, and then at the end of the audit, we come back and communicate the results to management and the board. Then on to the actual results of the engagement. This is the slide that you're probably most interested in, is if I were sitting in your chairs, is that you have a clean, unqualified opinions. That means that everything that you've seen through the year from your management team, those financial reports that you have gotten, there was no significant variations between those and the actual final year-end numbers. To go with that, we have no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies to present to you. That's what we refer to as the management letter. There is nothing to communicate this year. Historically, we have had one. I believe this is the first year where we have not had one. And then during the audit, there was no significant adjustments that had to be made. Because sometimes we can make reclasses or performance type of entries, and we didn't have any significant adjustments during the audit. Again, that'll be the first year for that as well, because we historically have had a few adjustments go through there. So I would just take the moment to say congratulations to your management team for a very clean, successful audit. Slide 5. Accounting policies, those are all disclosed in the footnotes, footnote 1. The one thing we just like to point out is they did not change significantly from 2010. What that means is two things. There was no new standards that had to be adopted. And secondly, you can change how you do things, even if it's not a new standard, based upon the circumstances of the entity. And so if those do happen, we have to look at that to see if there's a reasonable basis to make that change. There was nothing like that in 2010. Okay. I will tell you for 2011 there will be, because there are some new accounting standards that we've been working with your team to start working on. Judgments and estimates, those are where a lot of the risk lies in your financial statements, because just by the title you can see there's a lot of, it's not black and white. You have to make some decisions, assumptions, and they result in the numbers. The largest one you have is your allowance for your doubtful student loan accounts. And of course the interest and all the fees and penalties, receivables that go with that. What we do with those estimates is we look at the assumptions, we compare them to prior year, we see if there's been any changes, if there have been changes, why, and then we also look at industry standards, best practices, other clients, just national standards to see if there should have been a change. A lot of times it's not that was there a change or wasn't there, it should have been a change. And so when we did that, we basically came to the assumption that your methodology for coming up with allowance was reasonable. Slide 7 is the last, just kind of the catch-all slide, as I mentioned. The thing to note here is most of these say none. The top one is you can have other information in your financial statements, which by government accounting principles you are required to have. You have an MD&A section, and you also have a budget to actual revenue and expense statement at the back. Those are called other information because they're not the basic financial statements like your balance sheet, your income statement, your footnotes. They kind of go with it. We are required to look at that information in there, make sure it's consistent based on our audit results, and we did that with nothing negative to report on that. And then the material written communication, there at the end of every audit, there's a representation letter that basically says that you, it's like a checklist of all the things you were supposed to tell us that might affect the financial statements, and members of your executive team are required to sign that. It is at the back of the report for you to look at just so you can see what all that is. But again, we had no exceptions to the management letter, and everything was signed and reported as needed. That does conclude our prepared remarks. So happy to take any questions if you have them.
Questions or comments? Go ahead, Commissioner.
Well, I just wanted to say for the record that I regret not only that Fred isn't here, but I regret that Joe Hinton is not here, because we, as you recall, Susan, we did not have an established practice of doing these outside financial audits. And I don't remember how many findings you made the first year, but
there were several. There
were a number. And Joe was the one that was the most vocal advocate for these yearly audits, and I think it's appropriate that as Joe steps off the board, his legacy will be this particular audit. And I just wanted to say that the staff members are grateful to Joe for his leadership in this area, and we've come a long way, and we're going to stay exactly where we are. And we have the leadership now with people like Arturo working with you to make sure that we do.
You know, I will piggyback on what you say, especially for the new board members. The first year we did an audit was 2006. And, I won't rehash how we ended up getting an audit in 2006. That's probably an over-dinner conversation, but it was absolutely the thing that needed to be done for this agency. And a significant reason is because of all the trustee funds that flow through this agency and all the financial aid. And so, I would just join the commissioner in just saying that is, Joe's made many contributions to the board, but that will be the legacy that will be left. And I cannot imagine this board ever going back and not having an outside audit after all the work that's been done and really improvements in the systems that we've seen as a result of it.
You've significant improvements in just your processes, your just not only just the audit process, but your internal process of tracking documentation. And a lot of those were already on your drawing board anyway. The audit just kind of sped some of them up.
And KPMG's done a great job. They've done this work for us since 2006. So, Arturo, congratulations. It's the kind of management letter we all love to receive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But with your indulgence, I think it's proper for me to say that staff is the one that is responsible for this. The ones that are in the accounting office, in the business office, on the day-to-day operations. And at the risk of missing somebody, I know we have a couple of people here that, if I could just recognize them quickly, obviously under the leadership of Dan and Susan Corrine, who is in the room, Mr. Ken Martin, who has been very instrumental in getting us to this point. Ken, please. Thank you. Thank you for what you do, all of you. And there's many more right now back in the office watching, and to them I say thank you very much, because this is what we strive for. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And I don't think that we have to have a vote. That was just a discussion or report on it. Our first item under agency operations. Thanks so much, Rebecca. Thank you, Susan. Thanks for all the great work again.
Our pleasure.
Our first item under agency operations is going to be consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee regarding the Coordinating Board's operating budget for fiscal year 2012. And I'll call on Dr. Alonzo to make a presentation.
Thank you, sir. I will lay out the proposed budget, and I will highlight several of the pertinent points that I think need to be highlighted, and then staff and I will be glad to respond to any specific questions. Early on in the month,
stand out right here.
Yes,
okay.
The one that is on your desk, at your places. This is what we will be going over. But we did mail you a version of it early on. I believe we got it to you about the 8th. I wanted to give sufficient time for you to review it. And what you have here is a slight revision. I will highlight those revisions as I go through here. But before I go into the summary of the budget, I would like to briefly mention the process that we went through in developing this budget, the document that you have before you. As some of you know, I am a firm believer that decisions on budgets are best made when the division heads prepare and manage their own budgets, and the document that you have reviewed up to this point is the product of this bottoms-up process. With guidance and coordination from my office, The divisions submitted their budgets, their proposed budgets. They were then reviewed by David Gardner, Linda Battles, and myself. And those reviews resulted in additional information or adjustments and resulted in a document that then the three of us presented to the Commissioner for his final approval before presenting that to you. I would be remiss if I did not express my appreciation to all the staff that had a hand in this process, and there are many. I believe that this is truly a product of collaborative and an open process, and it demonstrates teamwork and cooperation throughout the agency. Let me now go over some of the budget highlights, and then we will be glad to answer any questions. The FY12 proposed budget before you totals $756,631,827. This is $188,621,000 less than the budget for the current fiscal year, or it represents approximately a 20% reduction, not unanticipated. The summary with the accompanying notes on comparing the FY11 current year to the proposed budget is on page 1 of your document, and it has notes as to why those individual areas decrease, mostly because of action by the legislature and the budget shortfalls of the state. The small changes that we have from the July 8 version that we mailed to you and the one that I'm going over now are due to the governor signing legislation that passed during the special session. The amount of trustee funds has increased by $4.9 million, and we have added 2 programs since July 8th, and those are highlighted on page 12 of the current budget. Those 2 programs are, number 1, additional funds for the Texas Armed Services Scholarship Program, due to one of our former board members working hard to obtain additional funds, and we place it on here as Senate Bill 2 strategy, just to make sure that you knew that this is in addition to what you have previously reviewed. The second one is towards the bottom of the page, which is a interagency contract that we will enter into with the Department of State Human Services for the Physicians and Nurses Trauma Care Fellowship. Staff is available to answer any questions to specifically what that will do, but I want to point out to you that those are 2 changes, and those 2 add up to that $4.9 million that I mentioned that changed from the last copy that you reviewed. 2 main components of the budget are operations and trustee. The operation fund, portion of the budget are those funds that are used for the administration of the budget. Trustee funds are those funds that are distributed to institutions, students, or other entities. Sometimes we refer to them, and you may be more familiar with the term pass-through funds. For some reason, the state uses trustee funds. On page 5, we have that breakdown of the amounts and the percentages between operations and trustee funds. You will know that our operating budget only constitutes 4.2% of our total budget, with trustee funds being almost 96%. The source of funds for the budget is reflected on the right-hand side of page 1. I know I'm skipping around and bringing you back and forth. And it consists of both general revenue and all other funds, which both of them took a reduction. However, I want to point out in a conference call, in a telephone call yesterday with Chairman Heldenfels, who called me with some questions and some observations, he thought that it would be noteworthy for me to point out to the fact that only 40% of our operating budget is funded by general revenue. One can say that of the total GR that is appropriated to the coordinating board for operations, less than 2% of that go for operation. In other words, the majority of general revenue funds go towards the trustee and the programs. And so I would submit to you that the coordinating board is giving the state a very good deal with that low usage of general revenue funds for administration. It is our goal to leverage as much of it as we can, and I'm proud to say that this figure here reflects that. And the chairman was very, very pleased with that and asked me to make sure that I pointed that out. Along with the reductions in funding, the 82nd legislature also reduced the agency's FTE, full-time equivalency cap, from 311 to 275, a reduction of 36 positions. Though our FTE cap was reduced by 36 positions from the current biennium, the agency was able to absorb all but 8 of those reductions by elimination of vacant positions. This was possible because back in January, the commissioner imposed a hiring freeze, which allowed us to be able to manage our reduction in FTEs with only 8 eliminations of actual, with only 8 layoffs. The proposed budget before you funds a total of 267 FTEs, which is 8 under the cap. Even though we are 8 FTEs under our cap, our budget limitations restrict us to those 276. However, the 8 FTEs that we still have available to us will give us the flexibility to seek and to obtain external funds and to be able to staff appropriately as needed when those funds come in. So we have a little bit of flexibility with those FTEs. One of the items that I know has that garnered a lot of attention and continues to still is the financial aid strategy, which includes our major state financial aid programs: Texas Grant, TEG, Texas TEOG for community colleges, work study, and Be on Time. This was reduced by 7.3% from the current biennium. Of particular interest is the Texas Grant Program, which was reduced by 10%, or approximately $60 million. This is a biannual figure from the current biennium. You will also notice on page 12 of your document that the Texas Guarantee Corporation donated $10 million for Texas Grant. So this softens the blow a little bit on our reduction of the Texas Grant Program, and we are grateful. It was also announced last week that TG would be making a $25 million gift to jumpstart the STEM program, which is the Texas Science and Technology, Engineering, and Math program, scholarship program, during this biennium. Because the details and the timing of the gift are still being determined and worked out, we did not include it in the proposed budget, but we want to disclose that we will be bringing back a budget adjustment to this committee and to the board at the October meeting to capture those funds. Some of the major programs that were reduced from the current biennium are developmental ed, the Texas Research Incentive Program, the Professional Nursing Reduction Program, Family Practice, Residency, Advanced Research Program. That's probably the one that took the biggest hit. It went from a $16.7 million biannual appropriation down to $1 million. The Teach for Texas Loan Repayment Program went from $5.7 to $500,000, as did the Physician Ed Loan Repayment Program, which went from almost $16 million to $5.6. Also, I want to point out, and because there were so many, you have a supplemental sheet before you, and it's also up on the screen, the programs that were serial funded. In other words, the programs that were totally eliminated. And as you can see, both from looking at your budget document, there are a lot of strategies that are blank, and that's because there's no money appropriated for FY12 and 13. But you also have the list up. Commissioner?
I wanted to point out to new board members and remind the ones that have been around it that we made a conscious choice here. We were when we were in budget deliberations, particularly with the Senate, Senator Shapiro was the chair of a work group on Article 3, and we met with her, and she said, what is your highest priority? We said financial aid, and we said we wanted to restore as much as we could of the 2009-2010, 2010-2011 allocation. And she said, if we do anything close to that, you're going to have to take heavy hits everywhere else. And we said, because that's always been our highest priority, we said, go ahead, we'll take the hits, and that's the result. So we originally the House Bill 1 had no money for new students. We recovered how much of the original Texas grant allocation, Linda?
$559 million of $614 million.
Yeah, we got almost, what, about $180 million back from the original, compared to House Bill 1, but that meant that we got wiped out in a lot of other areas. So we sacrificed our programs for financial aid, which is consistent, as I said, with this board's position as long as I've been here.
Commissioner, can you still comment, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but even with the 10% cut, how that translates into number of students? I just can't remember those numbers specifically. Well, can we talk about that in the financial aid report? Sure. How about that? Be a good time to do it. Okay.
Yeah, they're dire.
Yeah, it's still a challenge, even though we recovered that $180 million.
Yeah, we got a 10% cut in Texas grant, but we've had huge enrollment growth, and it looks like that growth will continue.
Okay, Dr.
Yeah,
Alonzo?
well, that concludes my remarks and my highlighting of the items in the budget, Mr. Chairman, and either I or Dan or Susan will be glad to respond to any specific questions, or Linda, on any items that you may on any questions you may have.
Questions? Now, we're going to need to take a vote on this today, correct?
That's correct.
And it's going to be subject to further amendment for the TG gift of $25 million?
That's correct.
Okay. But the $10 million for Texas grants is obviously in here. Just the STEM money is not in here.
That's right.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Okay. Motion by Harold. Can I have a second? Second. Can I ask one question before we take a vote? And Commissioner, this really may be for you, but can you? Sorry about that. But on the college readiness initiatives, I mean, that's where we took the biggest hit.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, we went from almost 15 to $1.5 million. Can you just comment on that from a standpoint of all that work we've done the last 3 or 4 years, and obviously, what efforts, if any, are we going to make in terms of sustaining those past efforts that we've made there?
Well, we've done several things that will mitigate somewhat the elimination of our college prep programs. Number one, we do have that Federal College Access Challenge Grant, which is about $11.5 million.
$11.5.
And that will help us. We are, as you know, through the foundation, we are aggressively seeking other sources of funding for our college prep programs, the most notable of which are Gentex and the AdviseTex program. We're also looking for money from other sources for other programs that were eliminated. We're looking for money for our teacher prep and changing the way we prepare teachers in the state. We're looking for outside funds to support those activities. And we will simply be much more aggressive about looking for extramural funding than we have been in the past to try to recover some of the gaps. We have some very good programs or very promising programs that we wanted to expand, like the AVID program. We'll just have to find other sources of revenue for that.
And for, again, I hate to say continue for the new board members, but the commissioner mentioned the foundation. That is the College for All Texans Foundation. And that is a separate foundation that was formed probably, how many years ago, Pam?
2001.
In 2001, yeah, almost 10 years old. That basically is a separate board from this board, which is, engaged in raising private sector funds to help in our college efforts. But it is specifically designed to support the efforts of the coordinating board. So the coordinating board, under those bylaws, gets to name a majority of the members of the board of the College for All Texans board. The chairman of this board does that being Fred. So we're very separated, but we're very, very closely linked in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of the purpose of using those funds. I'll also say we've somewhat reconstituted that board over the last year and brought some great people in from around the state, people like Woody Hunt, people like that, who have really brought great reaches to all corners of the state and help us in our fundraising efforts. So we're hoping that we can help bridge part of that gap also. So. Okay, I've had a motion and a second. I'm long-winded. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the budget as approved with, I guess, the exception of the TG $25 million, which the budget will be amended later. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by the same sign. Thank you, Arturo. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
So we have done agenda item 5B, have we not? Okay. Agenda item 5C is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee regarding a request to extend the contract for the Helm Student Loan Software annual usage and support fees for fiscal year 2012 with the total for the year not to exceed $900,000. Dan, you're going to make this presentation?
Presentation might be a little strong.
Comments?
In 2007, we entered into a contract with what was then known as Charter Account Systems and now is known as 5280 Solutions, I believe, to manage our loan management system. For the last 4 years now, we've had contract increases, and essentially the structure of the contract is built on the portfolio value. So as our loan portfolio has increased in size, the amount of the contract for 5280 has also grown from an expense standpoint. The other side of the equation, which is a little different from the rest of our agency budget, is that we generate revenues to cover some of our expenses from a loan portfolio standpoint. So although the total number is getting large, we are offsetting it with fairly significant revenues from originating specifically beyond time loans in excess of what we had planned for from 2007. Sid and I are going to meet with 5280 folks tomorrow to look at our contract structure and see if there's ways that we can mitigate some of the increases and also look at some of their newer platforms, because the technology for Helms is, while it's robust, it's not particularly cutting edge. So we do have a meeting scheduled. I guess it's on Friday. I'm happy to answer any questions. Mr. Chairman, you're fully aware of kind of the evolution of our loan management system, and with some of the new members, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have specifically with regard to this particular contract.
Okay. Any questions?
Dan, is this how many competitive programs are actually out there in the marketplace?
There are a few. When we did the analysis in 2006, there were a couple that we looked at that were viable at that particular point. The charter account system was readily used at other agencies, other state agencies, specifically in Alaska. When we did our financial analysis, the charter account system was lower cost on the front end, and they had a higher annual licensing fee, essentially. The other firms we looked at, one specifically was called IFA. It was relatively new at the time. It was a very expensive up front with lower annual fees. So that's kind of the history of how we ended up with charter. There are a couple of firms now that have competing technologies. I don't want to mention any names but one in particular, we have a relationship with some of their senior leadership. I contacted them actually a couple of weeks ago, and they said that they're a couple of years away from being in the market to offer a competitive product. But I think Sid's got some experience from his previous employment that, we're going to go kind of kick the tires now and see where we're at. One of the, when we looked at this in 2006, one of our two things we were looking at, one was to stabilize our current portfolio, because we had 7 different portfolios on the mainframe with 7 different operating systems. So this consolidated all of them into one system. So we're very confident now that we have a good solid platform, and now we can, if we choose to look elsewhere, we're at a good starting place to go do that. As far as the cost of the licensing fees, again, we're going to talk with them on Friday. I think we committed to the board, and we committed to Mr. Hinton again to continue to go back and look at our expenses related to the loan program and evaluate any kind of options we would have with either outsourcing some or portions of it to outside service providers. We continue to monitor that. It very much depends on the portfolio size. We're relatively small. Depending on what happens in November again, if the portfolio grows, we have a kind of a base of staff to accept and absorb a larger portfolio. If that doesn't come to pass, then we essentially are we have more staff than our portfolio size would warrant. So those are things that we look at on an ongoing basis. Anything that we would ponder would essentially come back to the AOC first, as here are some options to consider. The contract with 5280 is an annual, it's a 10-year contract, but it's renewed annually. So there are options for us to go in and look at alternatives if we choose to do that.
Any other questions, Harold? Okay.
You are saying portfolio size is very small. What is the portfolio size now? 900 million?
We're just short of $1 billion of principal balance, which is in the bigger picture of federal lending, which has gone through some transitions the last couple of years. That's small. Some of the competing entities would have $14 or $15 billion of federal loans in their portfolio.
How many loans do we have in this $900 million? I'm just curious, what is the average size of the loan?
The average size of loans that we're currently originating are about $9,000. It tends to fluctuate depending on which institution is borrowing. The independent institution students tend to borrow a little bit more than the public school students do. As far as the number of accounts, I think we're maybe 100,000. I'm going to look back. About 100,000 loans in the portfolio in various stages of first originated in 1965 all the way up to loans that we originate today. They're still in the portfolio.
1965.
They're all still in there.
And quick question is, you know, all these contracts, we talked about this where we're approving a contract not to exceed, you know, and I think I asked you this question, Dr. Alonzo, is really how we came to that $900,000 cap. Because, you know, my calculation is if we're already at $1 billion, you know, we're already, I mean, at 5 bips, that's about another 80 million in loans that would be absorbed by that. So am I hearing that already, that if we didn't have the cap, our fee would be floating up above that today?
Well, we project out into the next year, and we do it on a quarterly basis, and we estimate a loan volume based on historical loan volume, and I think for next year we're looking at $60 million of beyond-time volume and a potential of another $150 million of CAL volume potentially.
210.
So we have about $200 million
gross of payoffs
of increase in portfolio. We have repayments that come in and chip away at our portfolio balance. But typically, if we get $80 million of repayments, half of that is interest. So we get $40 million of interest payments, $40 million of principal payments. So our portfolio has been growing faster than the repayment stream of knocking down the principal balance. Beyond time in fiscal year 13 won't be nearly as high as it is in fiscal year 12 because of the funding that's been appropriated for 13. Again, it depends on kind of what happens in November with the vote as far as what our CAL volume might do. So I guess there's a lot of factors that go into the lowering and raising of our principal balance, and then the flip side of that is that we pay on a usage basis. So although the language in here is a not to exceed number, that we get billed on actual. So the 5280, we get our 9/1 principal balance, and then we'll send them the figures, and they calculate what the invoice is going to be for. So the number that we put in here is to cover our actual usage so that we don't have to come back to you for an increase, but we fully expect it to be less than $900,000. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
they're not going to bill us $900,000 because we put in a not to exceed $900,000 figure here.
Yeah, I think our comment always on this has been, you know, that gap that we're putting in here, we're asking the board to approve, you know, what's the I don't know if I'd call it the margin of safety in that gap that we anticipate that we'll use versus what we're getting to avoid coming back to the board for approval at a later date.
Well, I think, and Dr. Alonzo can correct me, but there's a 10% on the upside, such that if you approve $900,000 today, that you're also approving up to a 10% increase during the fiscal year. Should we end up going above $900,000, but it won't ever be higher than that unless we came back to you at a subsequent AOC and board meeting asking for that permission to do that.
Okay.
But again, our estimates are based on our historical loan volume. I think we've been fairly conservative of it. I don't expect that we're going to issue more than $200 million of loans this year, and I think that number is probably pretty firm. Not going to be higher than $900,000.
Okay. Any other questions?
Move to approve.
Can I have a second?
I second.
There we go. We've only got one person to make a motion to approve it. So all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed by the same side. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. The agenda item, where are we? D. Agenda item 5D is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the report on financial aid for college students in Texas fiscal year 2010. And Dan Weaver and Jane Caldwell will present this item. Is Jane here?
Yeah, I gave Jane a pass. Only if you ask a really hard question, I'm going to have Jane come up and help me out. Okay. So if you go easy on me, then you just get to hear from me.
Okay.
Do y'all have either this one or one with the white cover? The white cover, orange cover. We sent out the orange cover. The white one is just more from editorial. There's no substantive changes in the white version, okay. So I'll go through the orange one. If that's, the pages are the same, and
Okay.
And I guess, Mr. Chairman, I'll try and answer your Texas grant question first, if that's all right.
That'd be great.
Linda was ever prepared, as she always is, to have the impacts for next year. And I guess two ways to look at it. The way that the funds were originally appropriated, we estimated that we would serve about 33,000 new students in the biennium based on our projections for what the award amounts would be for Texas grant following historical patterns. The commissioner sent out a letter in the beginning of June essentially encouraging institutions to leverage available funds as much as possible, and we gave some target amounts for Texas grant awards that were a little bit less than the maximum amounts that they would have historically offered. And for context, the maximum award amount next year is $7,100 for a public 4-year Texas grant, and it was $1,890 for a community college full award. So we ran various scenarios and numbers and came up with a targeted award amount for university students of $5,000 instead of $7,100 in order to leverage available funds as much as possible. We also gave a single allocation to institutions as opposed to just an initial allocation and then holding back enough funds to cover all renewal students. So we essentially gave them, here's the available funds for you, here's target award amounts that based on our numbers, we would get to roughly half of your eligible new students would be able to get a Texas grant if you were able to give roughly $5,000 average awards at a university, $1,325 at a community college. That's a fairly substantial departure from previous practice. I think that the financial aid community has embraced the notion of leveraging available funds as much as possible. The initial feedback that we've gotten from, I won't say all institutions, but most institutions are that they're taking very seriously the commissioner's letter, and they're working diligently to try and target that $5,000 award number in order to keep the pipeline filled with new students entering the program. So we're estimating roughly 68,000 new students in the biennium based on this $5,000 award number, which, depending on what happens with enrollments and what happens with needy student enrollments, roughly 50% of new students.
50% of new eligible.
New incoming first-time freshmen, essentially, and still preserving sufficient enough funds to fund renewal students. And again, at that same targeted $5,000 award amount at a university. It does, although we're leveraging Texas grant further, it does put further burdens on some of the other grant programs that they would normally have used for other students. So you borrow a little bit from set-aside monies that you would normally have given to not a Texas grant recipient in order to make sure your Texas grant recipients have enough grant aid to cover their tuition and fee requirements. The statute wasn't changed, requiring the institution to make sure that students covered tuition and fees with grant aid if they got a Texas grant. So there's a financial, if I only gave a $5,000 award and tuition and fees at my institution were $7,500, the institution has to make up that $2,500 difference with other grant aid.
Out of institutional funds.
Or out of other grant aid, which could be Pell Grants. So if I'm a low EFC student with a high Pell Grant, it was not terribly burdensome. However, if I was a 2,000 EFC student with I'm doing these numbers, $2,000 Pell Grant, and I got a $5,000 Texas grant, and my tuition and fees is $7,500. The institution had to make up that $500 from some other pool of grant aid funds. So,
but it all has to be grant.
All has to be
gift
gift aid.
That with loans.
Not for within the statute. It's other gift aid.
Okay.
So again, the commissioner had a financial aid discussion with the Financial Aid Advisory Committee yesterday morning, and we kind of hashed through many issues that we're looking into the future about, some of which are what's the appropriate award amount, and how can we look at Texas Grant or other state financial aid programs to leverage their effectiveness.
And Commissioner, what was the response to that meeting? And I read the press release from yesterday, but
I think it was mostly positive. I think some of the proposals that we put on the table were a little bit stunning to some of the financial aid officers, but I think they appreciated that we brought them in very early to get their opinion about what we're thinking about. We're going to take a look at some fairly dramatic revisions to the way we oversee financial aid. We talked about capping all Texas grants at 4 years, even for 5-year programs. We talked about changing the definition of adequate academic progress from 12 hours a semester to 30 hours a year. If you wanted to do 12 and 12, then you'd have to do 6 in the summer, or you could take what used to be considered a full load of 15 hours a semester. We talked about not funding part-time students. We put some pretty dramatic ideas on the table, and the rationale for all of this was simply that we've experienced the first cut in the history of the Texas Grant Program. This is the first session that Texas Grant funding wasn't increased. Most of the students, over 50% of the students that are coming to the K-12 pipeline are poor. And I suspect that this is not the last cut that we will have in Texas Grant funding. We're going to have to find ways to make limited resources stretch further than they currently do. And I said to the group that it's my view, and I said I had to run this by the board, and we had to do some staff analysis, but I would rather give more students a significant level of help than give a relatively small number of students virtually all the help that we have available to us. And I think I talked about the principle of the greatest good for the greatest number, and that's what we're going to work on and present to the board at some point.
I think one of the things, and kind of going back to your comment, Commissioner, one of the things, I can't remember, somewhere in the report was statistics about part-time, less than full-time students and how much of the awards they were getting. And that was to me, it was pretty startling. I hadn't really focused on that, thinking about the exact point you're talking about. And how do you make that adjustment? So when do you meet next with that advisory committee again? What are the next steps there?
I don't think we talked about a particular date. We've got to do some work at the staff level to come up with run some data. For example, we're going to David and Susan Brown, David Gardner and Susan Brown already very quickly ran some preliminary data on part-time students and their success rates. We're going to have to refine those data, but we're going to look at financial aid from the ground up. And Dan has some ideas in his head that are so startling we're not even ready to roll them out publicly yet. The evil mind of Dan Weaver, we're not ready to tell you what he's thinking about, but there's some pretty dramatic ideas we're thinking about.
Okay. The financial aid, the advisory committee normally meets quarterly, plus or minus. They are very much in the weeds with federal regulations and reporting requirements, and the level of detail that they get involved with is mind-boggling. So I think it was enlightening for them to kind of take a step back away from the kind of being in the front lines to think more strategically about financial aid. addressed the Texas Association of Financial Aid Administrators, the TASFA board, yesterday afternoon, and I think that was one of the comments that came back from one of the participants earlier in the day. So I think that they know that this is a kind of a new world that they're entering into, both federally and from a state perspective, and I think they're receptive and want to participate.
Finally, the other issue that we have to monitor closely, as all of you know, there are going to be some very controversial discussions in Congress about the Pell Grant program. And because Texas is a state that is particularly reliant on federal financial aid for our students, what happens at the congressional level will have a profound impact on what we propose to do here.
Historically, Mr. Chairman, we typically give the financial aid report, but then our presentation really doesn't have anything to do with the financial aid report. So I thought I would take this opportunity at least to go through a couple of pages of the financial aid report. The structure of this report is exactly the same as it was last year. During session times is particularly taxing on my staff that works on this. And now this is usually the year that we try not to make any substantive format changes. If you'll flip to page 5 very quickly, I just wanted to kind of talk through a little bit about Table 1 to put some numbers around what the commissioners already talked about as far as the number of needy students that we have. Again, this is fiscal year 10 report, so this is a year old from where we're currently at. But the total number of, and we call these basic needy students, so these are students that have a cost of attendance or they have expected family contribution, grant aid need that doesn't get to cost of attendance. So we have 628,000 students, which includes both community college and university students. It includes public and private schools as well. First-time entering freshmen, 101,000 that are deemed as being basic needy students. So we're talking hundreds of thousands of students, and it's a replenishing population of students every year. On the right-hand side of that particular table is a dependent and an independent number, and it's something that we don't really talk about very much. Dependent students are what we might consider to be a traditional student, first time from high school to college. So it's kind of staggering that we have 335,000 students that are classified as independent students. So these would not be your Texas Grant students, for instance. So these are students that would have to avail themselves of all of the other aid that we don't normally talk about that are available at a particular institution. So the set-asides, TEOG would more likely go to an independent student perhaps than a dependent student. So I guess this just gives a kind of a scale and a broader sense of the student population that we're talking about. And to save us a little bit of time, one of my more favorite charts, we're going to flip to page 21. Unless somebody has a question about something in between page 5 and page 21. This gets a little bit, Chairman, to your question about loans. And life was going along happily between fiscal year 05 and fiscal year 08. Fiscal year 08 essentially was the beginning of the end of the FELP program, the federal loan program, Stafford loans. That point in time, though, also corresponded with an increase in the loan limit for federal loans. So you saw a dramatic increase in federal lending in fiscal year 09. And you saw just as dramatic a drop in alternative loans and the state loans. So the Hinson-Hazelwood loan program also is part of that state loan program. So you have this dramatic divergence in fiscal year 09, and now in fiscal year 10, you see that gap continuing to increase. So this gets back to my comment about the difficulty and the kind of the regulatory burdens that institutions have about packaging alternative loans. And the state loans, unfortunately, have been lumped into alternative loans and have in a lot of regards, have a bad reputation. We work with 14 other states that have similar types of programs to the state loan program to try to work on our message to the institutions and also work on our message to our congressional folks in Washington to try to figure out a way to get the state programs that come with very attractive borrowing terms to not be lumped in with alternative loans that have such a bad connotation. So I would suspect in fiscal year 11, when those numbers come out and we present them to you next year, you'll see the same type of dramatic shifting away from alternative loans. So I just bring that one up just because it's such a dramatic shift from previous years. I'll be happy to stop.
The state loans, Dan, those are revenue bonds?
They are, the college access loans are general obligation bonds. They are full pledge of the state of Texas. We've never drawn on any general revenue in the history of the Henson Hazelwood program back to 1965. They are self-sustaining with loan repayments. We are very conservative in our management of the program and will continue to do so.
But even with the full faith and credit of the state of Texas, they're still categorized as?
They're not. If they're not a federal loan, then they are other. And yes, we are considered as if you were going to any bank to get any kind of a loan for higher education. So if I had a 15% loan from Bank X, we are lumped into the same category that they would be. It's I don't want to criticize the department for doing what they did, but they put such a tight clinch on it. It's really made it difficult for the states to get the message out to institutions because we don't market. We've never marketed. Most other states don't do any marketing. We live through the financial aid offices, which is where we should reside. That's how we're trying to. The financial aid officers understand the needs of the students more so than we would sitting in our offices. We're going to continue to press. Again, we have a kind of a state coalition with 14 other states, and we conference call about once a month trying to strategize ways that we can get a more favorable interpretation from the department. So we're continuing to work on that, but it's slow.
Any other questions for Dan on the financial aid report? If not, could I have a motion to adopt the report as presented for fiscal year 2010?
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same sign. Thank you, Dan. Agenda item 5E is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to approve an interagency contract between the Coordinating Board and the Office of the Attorney General for the litigation and collection of our delinquent student loans for 2012-2013 biennium. Dan, I guess you're up again. Okay.
Taking a break. In about 20 months ago, I guess October of, what year is this? 2011, 2009. We entered into an interagency contract with the Attorney General's office. With that IAC, we transitioned 8 FTEs from the Coordinating Board to the OAG to formalize our collection efforts on accounts that had defaulted and gotten to the point that we were going to litigate a particular account. Previously, we had a very informal agreement with the OAG that had been in place. I guess it's statutorily required to be in place. That formalized the arrangement between the Coordinating Board and the OAG. Part of the contract was that we covered the expenses for those employees that transitioned, and then we entered into essentially a revenue sharing agreement with the OAG on attorney fees collected from that point forward. This particular IAC, which we've been working with the OAG, and I'll just let you know that Ron Del Vento from the OAG's office is here if you have any questions for him. Maybe, Ron, do you want to, I know it's No Tide July at the OAG, but if you want to just raise your hand. If you have any questions for Ron after I bore you with some of the details, he's happy to answer. The structure of this particular IAC is expanding the number of FTEs that we're covering from 8 to 10, primarily to enhance our post-judgment collections, so going after accounts that we have a judgment. Due to resource constraints, we haven't really been able to allocate sufficient resources to pursuing them to the fullest extent. We also have changed the revenue portion of the agreement. Previously, the OAG kept 67% of the attorney fees, which is an assessed value on the borrower. And the new agreement is 60% with the OAG and 40% for the coordinating board. Those are the, I guess, from a performance standpoint, over the last 20 months, we've seen a marked increase in our collections for our accounts that have defaulted. So they've entered into this litigation phase. To the tune of about $1 million+ more per year. I think that's
in collections.
More in collections. So we're generating a higher revenue from our delinquent students, and then the other side of that is the attorney fees collected, which is we've been capturing that now for the last 20 months. I think our attorney fees collections are approaching $1 million+. So there's a substantial amount of revenue that's been generated from the students that we're pursuing in default to help cover the expenses of a contract like this. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure Ron will be happy to answer any questions as well.
Does a bankruptcy wipe out these student loans if they're unsecured loans? No?
No.
Student.
Oh, you have to come and sit now.
Is this live?
Yes, you're live.
Good afternoon. Student loans in a bankruptcy case can only be discharged through what's called an adversary proceeding. It's a lawsuit filed within the bankruptcy case on the basis of hardship. In other words, the student has the burden of proving to the court that repayment of a student loan obligation would create a hardship in that particular circumstances of his case. Now, in the Fifth Circuit, that's a very high burden, and very few student loans are able to be discharged through these adversary proceedings. In fact, I would characterize it as a rarity for the bankruptcy court to, you're nodding your head, for the bankruptcy court to establish or agree that there's a hardship for the student in the repayment of his loan. So we don't encounter that problem. We did in the past, and our division will defend the coordinating board when those types of adversaries are filed in bankruptcy cases.
Okay.
Other questions? Again, for the new board members, we handle all this in-house until we did this interagency with OAG, and I will tell you it has improved dramatically. As we've watched it. So
thank you.
I have a question. How much is the cost per collection effort per loan? Average? How much money we spend? How many hours?
That may be difficult to answer, sir. We don't look at it on a per loan basis. We're dealing with a portfolio. We're dealing with probably in excess of 6,000 accounts. We may have at any one time perhaps 3,000 lawsuits pending. And, of course, we would prefer not to file any any lawsuits, and even when we do, and when the defendant or the borrower is served, they still have an opportunity to get back into a repayment status. And if they do and they continue to make payments, I believe it's for 2 years, then we will non-suit the case. We will dismiss the lawsuit and allow them to be back in a repayment status.
And prior to getting to this point, the staff that in loan program operations, which is, I guess it's upstairs and across the hall now, we go through our due diligence, customer service, trying to get them not to default on their loans. So we have a fairly rigorous and established process of contacting borrowers, sometimes when borrowers don't want to hear from us. So we take every, I guess we spend a lot of effort to try to get them not to default before they get to the point that they're turned over to the OAG's office. I guess I don't really have a dollar per account perspective for you, but we can certainly look and come up with one.
And we also put a lot of effort into them getting in a repayment status before that lawsuit is filed. Of course, litigation or filing a lawsuit is a last resort. We would prefer they get back into a repayment status. That's just one less lawsuit we have to deal with.
We know that 80% of the effort is put in on 20% of the loan collection. We just heard that in 1920, Bell Lab had discovered that, So how can we eliminate the effort, that 80% effort on 20% of the lower loan amounts? Is there any way we can do that? That way we won't be wasting a lot of energy, spending a lot of hours in collecting a small amount of loan.
He's looking for a hierarchy of collection efforts.
Well, yeah, that makes sense, of course. I mean, the same analysis is true in the tax area. We also represent the Comptroller of Public Accounts. And most of the state's bucks are spent on a very few tax delinquents, if you will. But we will not file a lawsuit, for example, that's less than $1,000. It's just not cost effective to do that. And our overall collection strategy, not just for the board, but with all the agencies we represent, is to focus first on the higher dollar amounts. That's where you're going to get the most bang for the buck and your greatest return on your investment of time and resources. I'm not sure if that addresses your question.
Does it mean that minimum cost per, lawsuit is $1,000 minimum cost? So we should not even try to collect.
No, I wouldn't say the costs are $1,000, but you do have court cost fees, you have filing fees, you have service fees. To the extent there is an answer that's filed, of course, you're going to have attorney time. We have to send our attorneys to court. There may, in some cases, there may be a defense or a litigable issue. We sometimes will have to file a motion for summary judgment. These are based on promissory notes, which are really sworn accounts. Then you have to factor in, I would suggest, the man hours, the time preparing that file for suit, the time preparing the motions and pleadings that are required to reduce that lawsuit to a judgment. Then when you get the judgment, you have to record it and abstract it and file it in counties where you believe either the borrower lives or has real estate. So when you total up all of the man hours in addition to the out-of-pocket expenses, $1,000, I would suggest, seems to be a reasonable level when you're considering initiating litigation.
And I guess we spend a lot of time trying to not get to that point. I guess is kind of back to maybe your original. Most of our borrowers have balances well in excess of $1,000. So
I suggest we look at the minimum cost we have per lawsuit, or what is the next minimum loan that we should be going after. I think that will be worthwhile to do. We may be able to save a lot of effort, a lot of money, state money, in trying to collect a small amount of loans. I think it will be worthwhile to do.
We can certainly look at that.
And keep in mind, these are not GR, not state money. These are other potential students' loan monies that are being expended or not being expended. This goes back to the self-sustaining nature of the loan portfolio. So if we can save $1, it's $1 that we can lend to somebody else.
I feel that we should not spend $1 to save $1. I think we should spend $1 to save $1.20 or $1.15 at least.
Yeah, we share that view, actually, in terms of in the collection practice. That's certainly a view we adopt.
We look at the cost of minimum cost that we have of a lawsuit or collection effort, then maybe we should drop off these loans which are below a certain amount. Just like you do in taxes. You don't try to collect the taxes less than $1,000. Similarly, we should come up with some kind of criteria, and that will save a lot of effort in collection effort.
We can certainly look at that.
Sure.
Thank
I think probably the bond documents would require some of that, would it not? That you make some effort to collect?
Oh, our full loan servicing and all of our default prevention and collection efforts are outlined in our official statement when we issue bonds. Sure.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe all delinquent accounts are placed on warrant hold with the controller's office regardless of amount. So there's a perpetual hold on that account on the state's system until that debt is paid, whenever that might be. So if that person that owes $500 were to win a lottery 10 years from now, you'd get paid.
It's this part of the coordinating board is not the kinder, gentler side of the coordinating board. So,
okay, any other questions? If not, can I have a motion to adopt the interagency contract between the coordinating board and the Office of the Attorney General for litigation collection for 2012-2013 biennium? Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by the same sign. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Agenda item 5F is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee regarding a request for approval to use the existing purchase order through the Office of the Attorney General for document execution service fees not to exceed $600,000 for the judgment portfolio through fiscal year 2013. Dan.
so maybe we should talk about the not to exceed number right off the bat.
That was my first question. Yeah.
Essentially, we've estimated the number of accounts that we expect to default that we would want to serve over the next 2 years. Again, this is a as used basis, so it's not something that we're going to use up to $600,000. This is a cap on how much we expect to use, and if we use more than that, we would have to come back to you between now and the end of the fiscal year 13 to seek an increase in that amount. But essentially, these are personal services of filing lawsuits with our borrowers that get to that point, as we've kind of previously discussed. These are fees that are charged to the borrower's account, so when the borrower does make a payment on their account, these fees then are recuperated by the coordinating board. So if we charge a $100 fee to service a suit, we would add a $100 receivable on that particular borrower's balance, and then when they do make a payment, we recover that $100. So these are not these are recoverable costs. These are not expenses that would not be part of our normal operating expenses, since they're recovered from the borrower's repayments.
Dan, I think it's important, Mr. Chairman, to note that one of the reasons for the increased cost is that when the Attorney General took this over, they deemed that it was more effective, more efficient to send serve personally instead of sending a letter, which often got lost or ignored, and so yes, it costs a little bit more to contract with somebody to personally go and serve the notice, but it's also pays bigger dividends. And this is from the Attorney General's office.
And what do we spend in this for this last year, Dan?
For fiscal 11, we've spent $239,000. We expect it to total $287 for the entire fiscal year. So we're a little bit south of that. I guess the other part of this is, our underwriting criteria for the loans has been in place now since 2007. It's not. It's a strong underwriting criteria. It's not. It's not. I would call us average, but our delinquency rate on our loans that now have entered into repayment since that time are substantially less than historical values for our borrowers, which is a harbinger for good things coming up into the future. It's really kind of, we haven't really seen any negative impacts from the economy from the last couple of years. Our default rate continues to be relatively low, relatively speaking.
So why are we doubling the amount?
It's a 2-year.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Yep. Second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by the same sign. Thank you. Agenda item 5G is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee regarding a request to approve the fiscal year 2012 purchase in the estimated amount of $175,000 of online billing services with Texas NICUSA. Dan.
This is an exciting agenda item. We implemented online payment capability this year, so borrowers now have access through our hhloans.com website to make payments on their loans 24/7, which is, we kind of feel like we've arrived as far as offering this service that probably should have been in place, many years ago. We are required to use Texas NICUSA to offer this service through the comptroller's office. We pay a very nominal fee for ACH transactions. We pay 2.25%, I believe, for credit card payments. We don't accept Visa. Right? Okay. Most of our students use ACH, which is good. We are currently absorbing all of these costs within our operating strategy for the loan program. We monitor this monthly to see if we need to reassess whether this is something that we want to continue to absorb or if we want to pass on the charges to our borrowers. Because of the structure of our loans, which has an origination fee, we've been able to manage this within our operating expenses, and for me, for the staff, it makes sense to continue to offer this at no cost to the borrowers, but it's something that we will continue to look at and evaluate and see if we need to make any changes. They're all kind of dovetailed into this origination fee. What interest rate do you charge? How much do we spend on servicing of the loans?
Okay. Any questions? And all this is currently absorbed by the loan program, which is money that otherwise would be going back out in loan proceeds to students.
Correct. This is part of the budget that you approved. That's part of our operating budget for the loan program.
But I think it'd also be interesting to look net present value of better payment stream, too, through ACH, too. So, I'm fine. Any other questions? Now I could have a motion approval. Motion.
Second.
Second by Harold. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by the same sign. Thank you, Dan.
I'll be back.
Finished.
I'll be back.
Oh, you'll be back. Okay. Agenda item 5H is consideration of recommendation to seek, one, a delegation of authority from the state auditor to perform an audit of the agency-wide financial statements for the fiscal year ended August 31st, 2011. And secondly, to issue a request for qualifications to conduct the audit. And third, to enter into a contract with the selected auditing firm subject to the approval of the board chair and the vice chair, as well as the chair of the Committee on Agency Operations. Arturo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you noted earlier, the board has requested this annual independent audit of the agency financials since 2006. And so the report that you just received here earlier was the latest one for 2010. And if the committee and the board decide that you want to continue this audit, we need your authorization to do two things. Number one, go back to the state auditor's office and seek delegated authority for us to continue this. And number two, issue a request for qualifications for the selection of an audit firm. The current contract that we have with KPMG expires or will expire with the completion of the FY10 audit, the report that you just received. And we recommend a competitive solicitation to continue, if this is your desire, to continue the audit. So what this agenda item seeks is that authority for those two actions. Once we have gone through the competitive process, under Rule 1.16, we will recommend a firm to the chair, vice chair, and the chair of the AOC for approval. One of the reasons, and Susan Warren alluded to this earlier, that we bring this item to your attention is that we want this, if this is your desire, that we want it done now is because there are some major changes to the GASB reporting standards, and we need to identify a firm as soon as possible so that we can implement those changes in cooperation with a selected firm. So we bring this for your consideration if it is the board's desire that we continue the audit of our financials for next year, for FY11.
Move to approve.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the same sign. Thank you. Agenda item 5I is discussion of the selection of a bond tax program legal counsel to perform legal services for the agency. And I don't think this requires official action on part of the committee. Bill, does it today?
No.
I don't think it does.
It does not. This is a discussion only.
Okay. And Bill Franz, who acts as, for our new board members, general counsel for this agency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you have being handed out to you as I speak is a synopsis, actually a brief synopsis, if I can be redundant, of each of the 7 different bond counsel proposals that we received in response to the RFP that we let out after the April board meeting, in which you approved us going out with that request for proposals. As you may recall, in prior years, and for our newer board members, in prior years we would typically get 1 and sometimes 2 proposals. We're blessed this time in that we have received 7 different proposals. All of these, I can tell you, and I will not name firms and I will not go into details because this is still an open selection process, and I'd like to collect the documents at the end of this meeting that I have passed out, or if you'd like to keep them, I can provide you with a non-disclosure statement. Nonetheless, the firms that have responded to our RFP are all top-notch law firms who engage in significant bond counsel work in various industries, and they span the spectrum from very large firms to one particular small firm who is also a hub firm. I can tell you that staff is in the process of evaluating each of the proposals and will be compiling a rating sheet, and will submit those ratings to the chair of the board, Mr. Heldenfels, to vice chair, Mr. Hahn, and to the chair of this committee, Mr. Ryder, for their review and ultimate selection of our bond counsel for the next year. And along with that, when we enter into that contract will carry with it an option for an additional year to retain that same bond counsel. You have both a side-by-side comparison as well as a script comparison of each of the firms. If you have any questions, the only thing I would ask is don't go into the details of these and don't name names, but I'd be pleased to answer any other questions you may have.
I think Bill, as you and I talked about, I think the real key is the scoring sheet. The proposals we got, I think they're about 3 inches thick that we got on our desk this last week. So I think, and those key issues we've historically identified for scoring, and we've looked at it. So be happy to address any other questions, and I guess we can approve this under...
There's no need to, it's a discussion item.
Yeah, but historically, have we brought it back to the Agency Operations Committee?
Not the last several times.
Couldn't remember. Okay. Any other questions for Bill at all?
How much credit is given to the hub firms? How much their prices can be higher, or by how much?
I don't know what the hub firms' prices would be at this point.
No, but is there any credit given to them? Like if they can be 10% higher and...
You mean a scoring? From?
We will probably not use... What we'll do first is we will look at qualifications of these firms. And a superficial review would tell you that all of these firms appear to be qualified to handle the coordinating board's business. But that's, as I said, a very superficial review at first glance. We need to delve into the proposals, and what we would intend to do is come up with one or more firms that we would, as staff, believe would be the best qualified to handle the business of the coordinating board. At that point, we'd begin discussions with the firms and take a look at price. I would anticipate the hub firm's participation, if it eventuates, to be on a smaller scale. I don't know if this hub firm can handle the coordinating board's business solely by itself. It's a significantly smaller firm than any of the other firms that have submitted proposals. So I don't know if that answers your question. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions or comments for Bill? And how soon, what's the timing on this, Bill?
Well, my understanding, what we'd hope to do is have a contract in place by the end of August. That's not urgent. Based on my understanding, we're not looking at, and Arturo's shaking his head yes, we're not really looking at going out with a bond sale anytime real soon. But I'd still like to shoot to have a contract in place around the end of August.
Other questions? Good. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate
Yes, sir.
That's a discussion item, and Bill, I'm going to give you mine back until we get the scoring sheets. The last item under agency operation 5J is along the same lines. It's a discussion of selection of a financial advisor for the agency's loan program and debt issuance for the fiscal years 2012 through 2014. And I think Dan and is Patrick here? Or Dan, you just going to do it? Okay. We'll present this item.
This is also a discussion item. We're in the same kind of time frame that Bond Counsel award is considering. We got only 2 responses to our RFP. Our longstanding financial advisor for Southwest and Estrada Hinojosa. I believe that we discussed this real briefly with Vice Chairman Hahn at our last conference call maybe a couple weeks ago. We're still going through the evaluation process for the 2 firms. Again, we're kind of in the same time frame. We're trying to get something done before the end of August. We're working on our evaluations, and we'll have a sheet available for for our ranking of the two firms that responded, and we'll present those to the chair, the vice chair, and the chair of the AOC before the end of the month or before the end of August. I don't know that I have a whole lot of other details to go into, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have, given the fact that I haven't really given you any information to ask questions about.
Can you remind me how many last time we went out for bid? How many proposals we had?
That would have been 2007, and I was not in the position. I'm not sure.
I don't even.
We can research that.
I'm just curious. I couldn't remember. Okay. Any other questions?
Not for me.
Arturo. Okay. Thank you. We will look forward to getting the scoring sheets, and hopefully by the end of August, Ann. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on into the auditing section now, which is agenda item 6A, and this is going to be a discussion of internal audit reports. Ruby Garcia, who's the acting director of internal audit, is going to take the committee through the 5 reports, and this is Ruby's first opportunity to come before the committee and make this presentation, so we welcome you, Ruby.
Is it on now?
It is.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here to present agenda item 6, the internal audit reports, the work plan, and the audit plan for fiscal year 2012 for your recommendation for approval to the board. And if it pleases the committee, I would answer questions at the end of my presentation. Okay. Agenda item 6A, we would like to present 5 audit reports. All audit reports were of institutions of higher education. 4 of these reports involved financial aid audits. All 4 of the institutions complied with the CB's rules and regulations for financial aid. One of the institutions, we did make some suggested areas of improvement. The 4 institutions were the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio, University of Mary Hardin Baylor, University Incarnate Word, Houston Baptist University. And the areas of recommended improvements were at Mary Hardin Baylor. The 5th audit report was the data security at UT Dallas Education Research Center. We provided details relating to all 5 audit reports to the committee previously. The data security at UT Dallas Center report, I would like to say they complied with FERPA requirements as well as the CB requirements in TAC 202. At this time, I would like to move to agenda item 6B. This is the status of internal audit work plan for fiscal year 2011. This is the current.
Ruby, can I ask one thing?
Yes, sir.
And I think all of us had the opportunity to read these. Really, all these were clean audits with even Mary Hardin.
Yes.
And the institution responded favorably to our comments.
That is correct. We did receive management responses, and they concurred with the areas of improvement. And yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
At this time, I would like to move to agenda item 6B. This is the status of the internal audit work plan for fiscal year 2011. It is the existing work plan, and I would like to say that we do have some projects in progress at this time, and our plan is to complete those by year-end, fiscal year-end.
So we don't anticipate any carryovers in the next year's audit plan?
No, sir. Of course, extenuating circumstances might always impact that. At this time, no, sir, we do not.
Okay. That's good.
Okay. At this time, I would like to move to agenda item 6C, and I would like to say that this is our annual audit work plan and risk assessment for fiscal year 2012. It is a proposed plan, and we would like to request the committee's recommendation to the board, to the full board, for approval of this plan. It does meet the requirements of the Internal Auditing Act. We used risk assessment, and we requested input from management. We considered that input, and we prepared the work plan and present the individual projects. And these are presented, I must say, in general terms. We have listed preliminary objectives and inherent risk. Inherent risk meaning these are not the actual risk, as we may determine when we perform the work. I would like to say that my plan is to work very closely with David Gardner, our Deputy Commissioner for Academic Planning and Policy, to develop specifics for each of the projects in his area of responsibility. And I say this because in the last few years, most of our focus has been in the area of financial aid, the other side of the house. So we're expanding our effort to cover more of the area of responsibility within David's side of the house.
Questions regarding next year's work plan?
Mr. Chairman, may I, not to correct Ruby, but it's a point of correction here overall. This item, if you approve this, does not need to go to the board. It's only approved at the committee level.
Okay, thank you.
You know, the questions I had on this, and Arturo, I think I passed some of these through to y'all. You know, on the part of the audit plan that's going to be the audit's 80%, one of those areas is audit developmental education for community colleges. And we've identified the inherent risk there is that the program initiatives might not effectively assist students achieve their degrees and certificates of higher education. I'm trying to figure out, how does the audit group measure effectiveness? You know, some of these I really do understand. We're looking at Texas Armed Services scholarships, and we're making sure that money gets to appropriate places and the normal audit functions that we've done. But how are we going to measure that inherent risk? I mean, we're trying to figure out what effective developmental education is today. And I'm sure we're looking at programs, but I don't know, Commissioner, if you could comment on that.
Well, we actually met about this very issue this morning, Ruby, Arturo, David Gardner, and I. And she was really referring to that when she talked about working closely with David Gardner to establish the metrics. There's some questions about whether it might be a bit early to measure the effectiveness. We could probably measure whether the programs are on track, but this is something that we need to look very closely at. And you've just asked the difficult question: what is it precisely is going to be measured if we proceed with this particular work assignment?
Mr. Chairman, would part of that metrics be improved issuance of the number of certificates or associate's degrees, or I mean, how else do you measure it?
Well, you could measure the number of students that have actually completed a given program of developmental education and moved on to credit-bearing courses. The problem, and once again, this is something we have to work out in conversation with David, the problem is that some of these programs really just got started during the current academic year. Okay. And or I should say, the academic year that just ended. And it may be difficult to make an assessment.
You have no history.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Harold. Do you have anything else, Harold? Two other things I had. One is, and it's a general overall comment is I noted that we're committing 20% of our resources to financial aid. How does that compare to what we did in financial aid this year in terms of the amount of our resources that we committed there?
Well, it reduces the percentage, and part of the reason for that is the last 3 years we have focused very heavily on financial aid, eligibility in particular, and so we want to expand our focus to other areas that have not been audited, because it is some of the areas of improvement we have already noted, and so we think it's important in our adding value and assisting the agency in closing the gap for 2015 that we also look at some of the other areas. So we have reduced the percentage in comparison. Yes, sir.
The only thing I want to make sure of is that it's still such a high area of focus for us that
yes.
we've got to make sure that we get a good enough sampling and coverage that gives us a representative look at, that at financial aid and all the issues that we've been looking at there. So I just encourage us to keep that in mind. And the third thing, I guess, Commissioner, this is more of a question for you, is really with the reduction in force, do we have adequate resources committed to the audit effort for us to get the same type of coverage we've historically been able to achieve?
Well, let me provide a bit of background, particularly for the two new board members. We made a rather sudden personnel change in the Office of Internal Audit just in the past couple of months, and Ruby has really been placed in a difficult situation to come up with plans at the end of the current fiscal year. For next fiscal year, she had responsibility for completing, helping to complete some audits and so forth. And so the office is in a bit of a state of flux. I've asked Ruby to make an assessment of personnel needs in the Office of Internal Audit. She's going to report to me and Arturo at the end of the fiscal year, and at that point we'll make an assessment about whether we have adequate resources to proceed with the work plan or whether we need additional resources. That's one of the reasons that we've lowered our actual number of FTE below the cap, so that we have some room to grow if we find that we need some people in critical areas. We'll come to the board in October with that information, but I just want to emphasize that right now the situation in internal audit is a little fluid.
And my comment when I was talking about our general agency
yes,
reduction
right.
in force is what I was really referring to, and just making sure that we still commit the same level of resource, not so much people, but make sure we're getting the coverage we need that we've historically been able to achieve in our auditing goes. So, okay, any other questions or comments? If not, I think most of these were reports, with the exception, I think, we do have to approve the annual audit work plan for fiscal year 2012 and also the annual audit risk assessment that Ruby just reviewed with us for 2012. Could I have a motion approving those?
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by the same sign.
Thank
Ruby,
you.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think that concludes. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah.